Okay.
All right. Welcome to our Transit Oversight Committee meeting. It is Tuesday, August 30th, 4:01 p.m. We are meeting remotely via Zoom. That is Janice. So present, we have myself, Adam Yoder, Eric Biter, members of Transit Oversight from City Council. I see the mayor joined us, Derek Slaughter, welcome. We have Adam Winder, Nicole Farr, and I apologize, I missed the third party's name.
Bethany Jones.
Bethany, nice to meet you and welcome. We have our IT, Chris Black, Jason Bolt from our police department has joined us. Welcome, Assistant Chief Bolt. And last and certainly not least, our city clerk, Janice Frank, is with us as well. We'll move through our brief agenda. Item 1 is a resolution authorizing property transfers between RVTA and the city of Williamsport. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Winder.
Yes, this is just a resolution authorizing the transfer of 1500 West 3rd Street, 100 West 3rd Street, 127 West 4th Street, 11 West Church Street, and 144 West 3rd Street from the city of Williamsport to River Valley Transit Authority. Just for clarification, 127 West 4th Street is actually that piece of Laurel Street. There was 2 buildings there at one time, and those buildings were removed to open up that roadway there. That is strictly used, or supposed to be strictly used, for the flow of buses to come out. This transfer will be just to transfer those properties, each property at $1. And the reason being is the amount of federal money invested in those buildings. The FTA and state government would like to see those buildings transferred to the authority as they invested so much money in them. And I'll try to answer your questions you may have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Winder. Eric, I'll turn it over to you if you have any questions. I've got a handful, but I'll let you go first if you have any.
I do, but what I'm going to say in rebuttal to the federal government putting so much into it and having a vested interest in it is the city also has a vested interest in that, and I don't think $1 is very fair. But I guess that's why we're here to talk about it. So,
no, so that was one of my questions. I mean, all I saw come across was the resolution in front of us, and then I think there's a copy of the resolution. This was adopted by the authority board, correct, Mr. Winder?
Correct.
Okay. That was one of my questions. So I certainly know that transit money, whether it was federal, state, a combination of both, went into a number of these properties. Do we know how much went into the property and how much local investment went into each property as well? I can't hear you, Nicole.
Overall, the properties, it was roughly $40 million of state and federal money.
Okay.
I do not know off the top of your head how much local.
Okay. Okay.
But essentially, because of the federal interest, from discussing with Jill, most of those grant agreements for that money was 30 years. And if the property doesn't transfer, it would be up to the city to pay back the federal government that money.
Okay. So I guess, I mean, broadly speaking, I guess the root of my question was really, I mean, there's federal state interest in it. There's local city interests. I mean, you know, what's the best way to reconcile that aside from just doing a simple transfer? I mean, I guess I don't understand what the options are to reconcile that. So, for example, you reference, if we want to keep them, we have to pay the federal and state interest back, correct?
Right, that was part of the grant agreement.
Okay. Is that reciprocal to the city as well, since we're working through and, divesting RVT into its own authority? Is that a two-way street? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm just curious.
Right, I'm just gonna say that's not in the grant agreement. The grant agreement that city council time authorized the signatures on does say that federal interest would have to be repaid if it was not transit.
Okay. I would be, what did other municipalities do when they ran into this situation when they created their regional authority? I know that we're one of the last in the state to do that, but I know that there's been a number of other authorities created, and I'm sure they probably ran into this situation. Do we know what the reconciliation looked like?
The most recent one was in Erie, and it was a parking deck that went from the city of Erie to the transit agency for Erie, and it was basically just turned over to the transit agency. There was no transfer at all.
Okay, gotcha. I mean, I'm not a transit expert here. I don't know the intricacies of the grants. On the surface, that seems odd to me, that there isn't a reconciliation process of transferring funding one way or the other to reimburse either the federal and state interest from our perspective, or vice versa, the city interest from that perspective. But
right. I mean, I guess the one thing I want to say is I'm not sure that's a rabbit hole that I would really want to dive down, only because so much transit money was used to pay back the bank financing that was used by the city or borrowed through the city. It could really open up a mess.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's worth, I would be interested to see at least the funding documentation for each of these properties to understand, what was used for what, where did the match money come from? What's the state federal share versus the city share, and try to explore that a little bit more. Like I said, I mean, overall, a number of these parcels, they're clearly transit related, right? And to some degree, and this will go into kind of another question that I have, and again, I'm asking these questions. I don't understand the intricacies of some of this, but most of this is transit related and should go there. I would like to know what our options are and what's equitable as far as clearing up the transfer, right? So I think having that documentation would help me, I think, maybe understand that a little bit better. Another question that I had, and this is more about the individual parcels specifically. When you look at the parcels on the county's GIS system, there's a handful of questions that stick out to me. And the really big one is 1500 West 3rd Street. I don't know. I think that there are sub parcels or individual parcels that aren't shown on the GIS, but if you look at 1500 West 3rd Street, for example, Elm Park, the Public Works Building, RVT, the bus garage, the brush pile, they're all included under that address as one parcel. Are we talking about transferring all of that as a part of this, or what exactly per property are we talking about transferring here?
Unfortunately, I believe it's going to be the entire parcel because once again, there was so much transit money invested in this entire parcel. Whether you want to look at the brush pile, you want to look at Public Works, there was millions of dollars invested into all of the buildings up here when the project took place. So I don't think that we're going to be able to break it up. The outbuildings for Public Works, 100% funded by transit dollars, to the point I can tell you that when I first started here, we removed all of Public Works equipment and trucks out of the buildings and put buses in the buildings for the triannual review.
Gotcha.
The police impound garage, I can justify with the roof, and the structure of the building was refaced using a federal grant.
Okay.
Brush pile, same thing, under the natural CNG public fueling station. So I don't know that we're gonna be able to separate this parcel out without running into a major nightmare.
No, I understand that. And, you know, kind of a follow-up question to that. I know, at least in the interim, we're a tenant of, I guess, technically ourselves, because we technically still own these facilities, but when they're transferred, would be a tenant of the authority until we figure out what is going on with City Hall. It seems to me, given that, we would also be probably leasing a number of these parts of Public Works building, brush pile, you know, et cetera, right?
Yes, unfortunately, it's a tangled mess.
Okay. Was there any transit money ever put into Elm Park for anything?
I can't say for sure.
Okay.
Let's just say it that way.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is, you know, on the surface at least, I would think that we would be able to go through a process to, at a minimum, deed that off, right?
Yeah.
And because I'm assuming that River Valley Transit Authority doesn't want to be in the recreation business by any means. And I'm sure that the federal and state agencies would agree with that also. I mean, they probably don't even know that these parcels are, you know, just so conglomerated, to be frank, right? So, have we looked at doing that yet?
Jill researched the deeds completely. I will reach out to her and verify if there was any opportunity of separating it, or if there was something in the deed restriction that we couldn't. The other part, I guess I should mention, is while we're talking about, you know, what goes back to the city, what,
Yeah.
blah, blah, blah. The other thing we were working on was the museum. So there was federal and state money put into the museum. The museum serves no purpose for transit. Our goal was to get the federal and state government to forgive the funds for that building and leave that with the city, with the potential for the city to develop it into whatever they see fit, etc. So I guess that was part of our trade-off.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, because that was one of my other questions. Are there other properties that are being looked at for future transfer, or is this all encompassing?
In our eyes, it was going to be all encompassing. Like I said, the museum serves no purpose for us. I mean, personally, I don't think it was the best investment at the time. So our goal, like I know Jill is working with the state to, you know, see about the possibility of forgiving the funds that were used there. We are working with FTA to see about forgiving the funds that were used from the FTA, to just kind of like let that property with the city. And
Okay.
I know if the mayor wants to talk about his intentions for it, or, you know, what ideas he has, but that's beyond me. Our goal is just to try to leave it with you all. I know there's a lot of money invested in that building, in the property itself. So if that helps with any more of an understanding.
A little bit. The Church Street, so that's a parking deck. Part of the reason I wanted to ask about that is, I mean, in my mind, that's falls kind of in line with, you know, Elm Park, right? I mean, I don't think RVT wants to be in the parking deck business either. It seems like that would be a more appropriate, but more appropriately owned by the parking authority. I mean, I understand, I'm assuming federal money went into that as well, but you know, again, part of the reconciliation question, I mean, if there are other options to reconcile this, I mean, that would make perfect sense. I mean, I'm sure that you don't want to be in the parking business by any means either, just like you don't want to be in the recreation business. So,
Right, the only thing is it does have transit-related items in the first floor with Susquehanna and Bullington there. We are in the midst of having an agreement between the Parking Authority and RVTA for not only management of the parking authority, but also for parking authority to manage our parking as well, Midtown parking lot, as well as the Church Street parking deck.
interesting. Okay. Interesting. A couple other questions. So was this reviewed by another solicitor other than Jill Nagy? And I asked that just, I mean, Jill does a great job. And she's the solicitor for RVTA, I think, to eliminate any potential conflict of interest for her from the city's perspective. We should probably have that looked at by either Austin or Norm.
I believe it was sent to Austin White by Jill. Mayor, did you hear from Austin on this?
Derek, you out there? Okay.
Sorry, yes, I'm here. My apologies. Yes.
Yeah.
I did not hear anything from Austin on this, no.
Okay.
Sorry, I thought I was on mute. I thought I was unmuted. Sorry.
No worries. No worries at all. So he does have it. We haven't heard any feedback from him though on this.
I personally have not heard anything back. No, I can follow up with Austin tomorrow morning.
Yeah, no, I think it would be prudent of us from the city's end, you know, to have one of the either him or Norm look at it. And again, you know, I don't. It's not that I don't trust Jill; she does a really good job, but you know, we should eliminate the potential for conflict of interest for her. That's doing right by her, and I think that's doing right by the authority, and doing right by us as well. So that's good that he has it. I'd be interested to see what he says. Those are the two really big categories that I had. I mean, it just on the surface, it didn't make sense to me with a couple of these properties why they were being transferred, and it's more of a scope question, Adam. So I mean, I get the funding from one perspective, but it does seem that we would be wise to, at a minimum, look at parceling off Elm Park, right? For sure. And like I said, I would be, we may not have options. And if so, I mean, it is what it is, but before finalizing that, I would really be interested to see the documentation associated with procuring each of these and getting a total of how much interest where is in each property. It would help me better understand this. And I think, you know, if we're going to really look at, I guess, really cleaning this up, it would be good to understand what other options are out there. Again, I understand what you've been told from federal and state perspective. But I personally would feel better looking into it a little bit more, to be honest with you. And I mean, here's the other big thing, you know, I mean, look, when you look at when we get our audit finally done, whenever that happens, what we're likely to see is a negative or in the red ending balance on our balance sheet, predominantly because of the pension liabilities, right? That could change one way or the other, given that, you know, we've divested RVTA, but nonetheless, it's likely going to be red. And should we ever get into a situation where we need liquidity, you know, properties are a big part of our balance sheet and enable us to maybe get through that. So clearly a number of these parts of every property on here has some kind of a transit function. But it's really a question of, are we able to separate the non-transit functions out? What are our options to financially rectify it? And then how does that play into how we operate as a city in the future? Do we want to lease, facilities from RVTA long term? Is it a short-term deal until we figure out what's going on with City Hall? I mean, unfortunately, the tanglement of RVT, it brings other questions to the table, and it's just not, unfortunately, black and white. So, those were a lot of the questions and thoughts that I had. I appreciate whatever perspective you've been able to offer, Adam. I know you can't offer a lot in some areas, but what you have been able to offer has been helpful. I appreciate that.
We'll try to
Eric, I've
send
been
you
talking. Go ahead, Adam. Sorry.
We'll try to send you out some information on these grants and different things tomorrow. I know Nicole goes back quite a ways. I might have to get some paper out and scan it in and send it to you for some of it.
Yeah, no worries. If you have copies of the deeds as well, that might help answer some of these questions as well for each of these parcels. So, I don't have them anywhere either. If I do, I missed them completely. And if I did miss them, that's on me. Yeah, I would like to see all that and start to try to dive into some of this. Is there a time crunch on this for some reason?
I don't know if it's necessarily a time crunch. It was just on Jill's list of items and she got it to us, so we just forwarded it on. I will say that I know she was reviewing the deeds and it was about 440 pages. So I'll see if she can send it to you, because I know there's a lot of transfers from water authority to city, city to water authority on one property, parking authority, the old Midtown deck. A lot of different things played a role in the transfers. So I'll see what she's definitely able to forward on to you.
Okay. No, and the other reason I ask about the time crunch, if there's not a time crunch here, it might be wise to, either remove it from the agenda or table it to try to flush more of this out. I mean, at a minimum, if we're going to parcel off Elm Park, that's going to take some time, and it probably wouldn't make sense to transfer that this week before we, parcel that off, for example, right? So that's the only reason I asked that. So if there's not, between now and tomorrow, at noon, if there's a particular way that it would make sense from RVT's perspective to manage that, let me know and we can respond accordingly, whether that's removing it for now, tabling it, whatever the mechanism is. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. Eric, I've been talking a lot. Do you have any other questions or anything to add on this? There was a lot there, so sorry. I didn't mean to hog up the room.
No, that's quite all right. You asked pretty much everything. What concerns me is just the continued entanglement that these properties and RVT still has with our pending audit outcome. I would really, really like to see that. Haven't really heard much about that in the past couple of months. So I welcome an update with that as well.
Yeah. The other thing I should really say to all of you is that, if the city chooses not to pay back the federal interest,
Sure.
the federal government takes the property and they can do whatever they want with it at that point. The city has no choice. I guess at one point there was a building that was transit, but didn't transfer the transit company. The federal interest was not paid back like it should have been, and it became an FBI office.
Okay. Gotcha.
Does that mean we'll have people that move into the city and we get new residents?
I'm not sure.
They can buy houses, become taxpayers.
Yeah.
Not that I want them to come in and take the buildings, but it's part of the process. I think that it's the city's due diligence has to be done in this instance, specifically with things like Elm Park, where I see no reason why that would go to RVTA, unless I'm proven otherwise, which
Right, but believe me, I don't want Elm Park.
I didn't think so.
I didn't think so either. Yeah. I mean, what kind of time frame has that happened for in the past? I mean, if you're telling me, we've got a year to figure this out, well, that's great. If you're telling me we've got 3 months since the authority went live, well, then, I mean, heck, why weren't we figuring this out 2 months ago? I mean, that's
Most of it came to light during our triennial review. That was the big push.
Okay.
Just untangling different items. Lease agreements were a big topic of conversation, which in September are going to become an even bigger topic of conversation within transit-related facilities.
okay.
So it's going to be a little challenging with the way it is right now, because RVTA can't be the ones to push the issues with the lease agreement, because we technically don't own the buildings, the city does.
Mhm.
So you all are going to end up with pressure from the FTA, and it's going to be at no choice of yours on what the outcome is. And I don't say that in a way to threaten you. I just say that the way things were done was not done correctly per guidelines of the FTA. Different lease arrangements were not put into the grant the way they're supposed to be. So there's penalties there. There's a lot of things that are going to change start changing in mid-September with different things within these facilities. So I guess my goal was to transfer the properties, take the pressure away from all of you, because there's another way to put it, but it's going to get ugly. There's going to be some upset people. There's going to be upset people in the community for sure, because our hands are going to be tied by the state and federal government.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate.
And it's because of the way the grants were written when the buildings were built, not necessarily by any act of any of you or us.
Yeah. No, I agree.
It's the ones that are going to pay the penalty, to say with people.
No, understood. Well, if that's all going to start to come to fruition in September, it seems like we've got at least a little bit of time to at least start to look at a few of these things. And I guess whenever that starts to come to fruition, it might be worth having a conversation with FTA and the state, and just simply explaining, hey, look, we want a lot of this to go to RVTA, but we just really want it to be done the right way, and make sure that RVTA is truly unwound and not involved in scopes that they shouldn't be involved in, as they have been in the past, right? I would think they'd be excited to see that, and excited to see the city and RVTA working together to untangle it the right way, so to speak, if that makes any sense.
It does. It definitely does. It's and once we get our triennial review back, we'll definitely be more than happy to share it with you, so that you can have an understanding of what road we're going to be stuck going down here very shortly. Like I said, whether it's the city or RVTA, but unfortunately right now, things with the city affect RVTA and our funding. So for example, our funding was being held up by the state due to RVTA's audit as well as the city's audit, because up until July 1st, we were part of the city. So part of your audit includes RVTA or RVT at the time. If those audits are not concluded by December 21st, the state is going to basically stop all funding for RVTA, and the city of Williamsport will forfeit all of the funding that RVT received, and it is my understanding could potentially have to pay all that back.
Well, it seems prudent that we have another conversation in a couple of weeks about that specifically. That's the first time I'm hearing that. And
that letter just came to me yesterday.
okay, well, it might be if the city's involved, it would be, I think, I guess respectfully ask you send that to us, so we can get a look at that, and then it might be worth having a discussion about some of the backstory there, and getting that figured out. I know in finance in a couple of weeks, I think there's going to be some discussions surrounding budget, capital budget, and I suspect about just the financial department in general. And I think the audit, I hope, is included in that. And I'll make sure to mention to Liz. We should probably have a concurrent conversation here about that. And I think specifically related to RVT, what we need to do to get that done.
Right, and I'll say this, the mayor was great. He reached out to PennDOT when I told him that our funding was being held up, and he helped figure out why and helped get the ball rolling on getting us funding until December, and explained that, the city's audit is unfortunately held up still due to different things, but he was a great help with getting that moving.
Gotcha. You were notified this week, you said?
Yesterday.
Okay.
Because we were kind of in limbo on what exactly all was holding up. We knew our audit is in the hands of RKL, just naturally they're backlogged as well. And then the mayor, like I said, the mayor reached out and he found out that it involves the city's audit at that, and kind of helped get that pushed through yesterday.
Yeah.
And I instantly received a letter after his conversation with them.
Well, if you'd be so kind as to forward that over to at least the members on Transit Oversight, that would be great. And then I guess moving forward, Adam, Mayor Slaughter, if you'd be so kind as to at least keep the Transit Oversight Committee in the loop whenever things like that happen. If you get communication like that, don't be afraid to forward that over to us. We can help whatever way we can whenever it comes through. The way to address and I think we get through that is to communicate together. So we're here to help in that regard.
So I'll definitely forward it over to you.
All right. Well, that's a lot on transferring some land. Any other comments or questions from you, Mr. Biter?
I have none.
Okay. All right. Well, Adam, again, related to this item specifically, if you want to, depending on which way you want to go as we take more time to flush out some more details, just let me know which way you want to go. It's related to the agenda. It doesn't matter to me. And regardless, Derek, if you can have Austin send whatever feedback he has on this, whenever he gets it, that would be great.
Yep, will do.
All right.
I'll be honest, I'm fine with pulling it from the agenda, and let's say we can put it back on in 2 weeks.
Okay.
We can get you enough information, put it back on in 2 weeks and go from there.
Okay. No, if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly fine.
And that's fine. I mean, like I said, that way they can.
Okay. And if you have questions on information, anything from our conversation, just shoot me a text, give me a call, shoot us an email. We can offer whatever clarity. Whenever you get it, if you want to send it to us in advance, we can look through it. We can even try to set up some time between meetings to go through it. I'll be fully honest, my time during the week is tough during the day. I'm happy to use a few of my lunch hours to pop over there and sit down and try to go through this to understand this together. I don't want to suck up a ton of time in people's evenings, but if we need to do that is an option also. But as you get information, just keep us posted, and we'll work diligently to start diving into it before the next cycle of meetings.
Sounds great.
All right, that sounds great. Also, I appreciate that, Adam. we will move into item number 2, any related items. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order between members of council, the mayor, and our team at RVT? All right. Well, I will adjourn the meeting. I appreciate everybody's collaboration and feedback, and I'll look forward to seeing what we dig up and revisiting this in a couple weeks.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Hey, thank you all. You guys have a great evening.
Have a great evening. Thank you.